Before we go to part 2, let's revisit part 1, but this time with Sage. So the question was, if we treated our government as though it were an investment, would you invest in a company that was running a $20 trillion deficit?
In actuality, it's a $30 trillion deficit.
In addition to that, they continue to lose trillions of dollars every year. In a 3-year period, the DoD, the Pentagon, couldn't account for $94 trillion. Trillion.
To put that into context, the entire global GDP for 2021 was also $94 trillion.
And you probably remember that one time when Rumsfeld declared war against the Pentagon bureaucracy for losing $2.3 trillion the day before 9/11. Oh, maybe not.
Back to our point, this hypothetical investment also keeps books that are not auditable. The top accounting firms in the world have attempted unsuccessfully. More Sage. So despite the fact that these government agencies are required to keep track of their spending in order to be accountable to taxpayers, the Pentagon underwent its first audit in 2018 and failed miserably and has been failing miserably ever since.
Quick recap, we are mandated to invest in a company that is running a $30 trillion deficit, that loses about that much money every year, that has books that are not auditable by the top accounting firms in the world, and won't be auditable until 2027. But Jesse, you're so focused on the Pentagon. Don't you think it's important to fund your fire department, your police department, your schools, etc.?
Those services are largely funded by state and local taxes.
I think it's important that we all understand which taxes pay for which things. Largely property taxes that fund police departments and fire departments and schools. Gas taxes largely fund road projects, infrastructure, as do consumption taxes. This is not the job of the federal government.
So you're starting to get it because you're smart. Talking about federal taxes, where do your federal taxes go? Largely, they go to pay interest on national debt. So our bondholders, when you purchase a bond, you are effectively lending that entity money. So who is purchasing our bond market? Those are the people that we owe money to with interest. They also go to mandatory allocations like Medicare and Social Security. And then the budget that we always hear about, the portion that Congress gets to decide what to allocate spending to, is called federal appropriations. So why are we focusing on the Pentagon? Because the Pentagon receives over 50 cents of every dollar of federal appropriations.
It's approximately 54 cents of every dollar.
Can we sage and sidebar? This is the Pentagon we're talking about, and forgive me, I have to read this because I'm not smart enough to put it up and read it while it's up there.
Old systems for tracking funds, a slow bureaucracy, and the sheer size of the U.S. defense apparatus have kept audits from passing since they began.
This is the Pentagon. They're responsible for the entire security of our country, and they can't come up with an auditing system that can track their spending. What?
What?
Okay.
So the first video talked about how this potential investment, this corporation, is funding activities that are completely out of alignment with our integrity, our morals, our values. Let's save that for part 2, and let's go back to the bond market. Who do we owe money to?
More Sage. Okay, so we talked about in the first video how this corporation, this potential investment, has one job: to protect our freedoms and to make sure shit doesn't get too far. Maybe that's 2 jobs. I don't know. And then we take a look at
record inflation. We take a look at our stock market going to complete trash. We take a look at our bond market going to garbage. The 10-year being over 3. There's no place to invest your money that's safe, where you can build wealth. The investment banks and Wall Street are taking over the residential real estate market, where 9 out of 10 of us build any wealth in the first place.
Let's break this down. If you're not doing your one job, in a republic, in a democracy, you work for us. It's our job to check the state and say, hey, you're fucking fired. But we don't, so let's break this down. The bond market, i.e. the debt market, i.e. how we raise funds to pay our bills that we can't afford with taxpayer dollars because no one checks the state. Who owns the bond market? Who are the largest stakeholders? So there's China. And above that, there's Japan. And then above that, there's the Fed, which is our central bank. So our central bank is the largest stakeholder, loaning us money to pay our bills now. Where are they getting the money to buy those bonds, to lend to us? Turns out that's actually a really dope question, which brings us to quantitative easing. QE, quantitative easing, is something that the Fed has been doing for lots of years now to pretend like it wasn't so.
So to appease the fact checksters, I think intergovernmental agencies are actually the largest stakeholders. So that means Social Security funds, etc., which is a good thing. But here's why it matters, that the Fed is trailing very closely behind.
Because where does the Fed get these funds? Well, they increase reserves on a balance sheet and essentially print the money out of thin air.
So it doesn't exist. They're just making it up.
So what does that mean? That means infusing a bunch more money into the economy. What does that lead to? You guys are getting smart. What does that lead to? Inflation. So that devalues your dollar and every single investment that you hold. To be clear, quantitative easing is a controversial, unconventional monetary policy tool that the Fed utilizes. It hasn't really been at the forefront of everybody's mind because inflation hasn't been an issue. But not to like say I told you so, but some of us told you so, like in 2012.
An invitation to reference previous Kismet videos where we talk about the Fed and how utterly useless they are in exercising monetary policy and actually doing something about these issues that we face.
And especially when like they created the problems. And it's this weird like Hegelian thing where we're like, oh, you did it, but also fix it. And like, we trust you. But we shouldn't. Sage. So just in case any of you were surprised by this inflation, maybe now that you're so much smarter after watching this video, you're like, hey, apathetic nihilism is an incredibly ineffective tactic, and I should listen to some of these people, even if they're like running their mouths like they're crazy. Like maybe they know some.
So going back to inflation, the reason that your dollar doesn't go as far, the reason that your cost of living is more expensive, the reason that your salary isn't worth as much.
Inflation.
Not a surprise. It was to be expected.
And then going back to one of the largest stakeholders of that debt, lending us money that we owe money to, we're also sending foreign aid to. The second largest economy on the planet, on the globe, on this rock that we all live on. We're sending them foreign aid because they need our help at the same time as we're borrowing money from them at interest. What? So hopefully this was helpful in learning where like a third of your income is going. You earn money and then the government takes it.
And you think it's going to things like the skyrocketing rates of homelessness and hunger and drug addiction and alcoholism and all of the things we see and face day to day in society that are impacting us personally. But in actuality,
it's going to support the foreign aid for these stakeholders that are actually lending us money because we can't pay our bills. In part 2, we'll take a look at some of the other things that our federal tax dollars are funding, like torturing beagles, just other things that are like completely out of alignment with our integrity. And maybe we should like take a look at ourselves and consider whether we're complicit.